So plan for today. This whole week, to be a little more general first, I want you to feel at least somewhat confident in your ability to write this paper. That's what this week is about, okay? Today, we're going to take one of your classmates' discussion post. We're going to use that to... Is that live? Surely no. We're going to use that to talk about, potentially model, ways to start thinking about how to actually make a paper, okay? The way I expressed it before class was, my only goal for today really is for you to leave here with a foothold into what you're going to write about, right? Like, if you leave here with a couple sentences, but a couple sentences you feel like okay about, I consider today a success. All right, back to our regular whatever. Oh, okay. All right, so what we're going to do, I sent you guys an email around 11 o'clock. It should be in your inbox. It's a link to a document where I've copy and pasted one of your classmates' discussion posts. If you would please open that up. I guess I can project it. Yeah. Go ahead and open it, but I'll project it as well. Oh, that was probably it. Yeah, that's it. All right. I give this spiel every time we do workshop. So I'm going to give it to you now. As I mentioned, what we're looking at is a classmate's work. So we need to be respectful. I think this student does some things well. We're going to talk about that. I think this student needs some help, which is ultimately what all of us are here for. So we're going to talk about that. And that's just generally how we treat student work, right? That's pretty much it. So what you have in front of you, I mean, up here, but again, ideally you would open it for yourself because like you got to scroll. This is their discussion post. All I really want you focused on, because the weird thing about a discussion post is my favorite way to start an assignment like this because it's informal, right? I think you guys are a little freer, as you should be, in a discussion post. But the trick is we got to ultimately move from that to like a pretty formal way of thinking, way of writing, which is a paper. And again, that's what we're going to do today. All I'm concerned with, I want you to think about two things. Look for two things as you read. Specific, potentially significant moments that this person mentions in the movie, okay? And or arguments, even implied ones. Anything where the student says something and you're like, oh, they might have to prove that. They might have to kind of walk me through what they're thinking, right? Either one of those two things. Take a couple minutes, read through it, we'll talk about it. I mentioned at the start of all this, discussion post by its very nature has a tendency to encourage informal discussion, right? I mean, that's kind of the point, which is good. I think sometimes part of your issue, I'm just students generally, when it comes to writing a paper is just the thought that you have to write a paper, right? Like that's kind of a big deal a lot of the time. It can be kind of intimidating. This is just a conversation. You do those all the time. The issue is, because of that, there's going to be some fluff. Think about most of the conversations you have in the course of a day. If you had to trim that down to like what mattered, ultimately, man, you'd make a lot of cuts. You know? So, right off the top, I'm just going to do this and get it out of the way so we can get to the other stuff. I would say we can probably cut from here up. Now, real quick before I cut it. The reason I'm cutting it is not because it's not useful, but because it's not useful in a paper, okay? This is what I like to call a runway. this got the student into what they wanted to say about the movie. So it's awesome. But once they get there, they leave all that behind, right? So it's done its job. That's what we're left with. It just helps you focus a little bit when you trim the fat, okay? I'm gonna make this a little bigger. I mean, I know you guys have young eyes. Okay. So now, a big block of text, slightly smaller, but a big block of text. Anything you guys noticed, specific moments or elements from the movie and or like arguments stated or implied, anything like that. We're just trying to build like an inventory here. Yeah, I should have pulled out a marker. Yeah. Yeah, he does it like maybe 5 or 6 times, if not more, right? Always sadly walking away. This is what I was thinking about doing while you guys were writing. Okay. We'll call it somber outros. You've heard of an intro. Outro is the same thing, but when you leave. He keeps getting like, his exits off the stage are always like sad. That's interesting. Okay. We got a couple more in here. Other things you guys noticed. I just want to get them up on the board. Do we have anything to say about Apollo? Did we say a couple things? They're pretty interesting. Put your hand up? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The discussion where Apollo is wanting to vote against the right person for a white decisions.
This question, and weirdly, I didn't expect it to be such a question of race in the film. Again, we quibbled on it in class, but like, he straight up asks for a Snow White contender. Like, he says that. And yeah, it could be he's talking about experience, but you would have to blow me away to convince me of that. Right? I think he wants to fight a white guy. Why? Absolutely, that's worth thinking about. Good. Other things you guys notice. How do we describe Apollo? It's probably near the top now that I've cut all that fat. Larger than life what? Character. I keep doing it, but I think you guys are mostly on board now, kind of pointing to the fact that Apollo is a bit of a character. Right? You really don't see much of his humanity at all. Right at the very end you do, and that's part of why I like that scene so much, right? Well, I know we didn't watch it in class, but I keep talking about it when he says, ain't gonna be no rematch. That's like the only human moment. Maybe that and right before the fight. And I guess maybe during the fight when he's getting like punched in the ribs. That's kind of it, right? That's interesting. The rest of the time, he's somebody else, and you don't really know if that's like the real him. So then the question always became in class, why is he doing that? And what kind of character is that? Good? How do we talk about Rocky? We talk about him in a totally different way, right? And if you don't remember, you can do this yourself. What kind of guy is Rocky? What happened?
He says an everyday guy.
Everyday guy. The term you'll see thrown around usually. He's an everyman. One word. And it means that. Just everyday kind of guy. Cool. Anything else? We mentioned the poster, which I think very clearly goes with that. It's part of that conversation about him being a character, right? Okay. What about arguments they make? They make a couple. They are lightning quick. They say a couple things. I kept writing, how? They don't explain it, which again, you weren't supposed to. You didn't have to. But now we're thinking about a paper. And make an argument, you got to try to explain it. Do you see anything in here that they have to prove? Lights are backwards for this operation, aren't they? You see it better. Yes, ma'am.
The argument that Apollo has to live up to the persona that he created.
That's interesting. And we thought about this last time. We didn't get to like a hard answer. That's hard to do in class, by the way. But yeah, there's also pressure in some way, shape, or form attached to this persona. I think the student's right. I think he has to live up to it somehow. And again, Rocky has his own pressures. Whether or not that's the same kind of thing remains to be seen. But in Apollo's case, yeah, you get the sense that like the reason he's worried about losing the fight, at least on the surface, is that would totally destroy his reputation, like his persona, the kind of guy he is, to lose to Rocky, right? Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you guys notice? How about, he knows he will beat anyone in the ring. That's not an argument, by the way. Don't get excited. He does feel that way. Lost my place, hold on. Turn into a smart app, there it is. So by fighting a white fighter, he is elevating himself and bringing more attention to himself. That's interesting. I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest with you. But it is an argument. What do you guys think? We touched on this before, and it is a damn difficult question. But why does he want to fight a white fighter? He says a Snow White underdog or a Snow White fighter. I forget what he... Why? It's when they're talking about the bicentennial. It's when they're talking about America. Yeah. The founding of the country. Yeah.
And it was the actual holiday of it, so like he felt like representation.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But my question was, wasn't he supposed to fight a Russian guy first?
Well, I don't know who he's supposed to fight for. I don't remember the guy's name. We don't find anything out about him. Rocky fights a Russian guy in Rocky 4.
What about the guy who got to fight for Creed? Wasn't he Russian? Like he was a Russian guy?
I have no idea. I don't remember the guy's name. Possibly. But again, I know Rocky fights a Russian in 4. I'm not sure about this one. But either way, the point is, because this seems to be part of this conversation, the question of Snow White, and absolutely the bicentennial, the sort of, I know some of you can't see this because of the screen, I apologize. I'm going to raise it here in a second. But the like American narrative that we have, not just that we have, because again, the movie thinks about that, but the way they talk about it in the movie, right? Think about all the scenes with the businessmen. They keep talking about America and either what they think it means, which is possible, or how we talked about it in class, how they try to take advantage of what other people think it means. Like they use it to sell the fight. They use it to sell maybe other ideas, you know? Is this part of that, or is it some other element? Because Apollo is the one that wants one, right? Like I know he's part of that world, so maybe it could just be salesmanship, which is what I think the student's talking about. There could be something else to it too. Okay. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Let me see. Ooh, there's one other thing. Hold on. The student also says this is when he says he has to live up to the persona, right? It's in the last third. He goes on to say, this is evident in the way he approaches the match. His mind is on other things he deems more important. Very true. I think this is because he doesn't know anything about Rocky. Rocky approaches the match as an actual fight, while Apollo approaches the match, they say, as a charity match. I don't think Apollo approaches it that way. I'm with him right up until there. How does Apollo approach this fight? I agree he doesn't approach it like a fight. He doesn't approach it like Rocky does, right? How does he approach it, do you think? What does he treat it as? How does he talk about it? Think all the way back to last week. We watched the scene with his trainer, watching Rocky on TV, and he says, hey, champ, this guy's punching dead animals, man. You got to come over here. He means business. And Apollo says, I mean business too. And a couple of you picked up on that. He means a different kind of business. Right? I don't think it's charity. I think he means business. That's interesting. And again, the story of the movie is that is probably why it's so close. That is why Rocky is able to kind of stand in there and go the distance, as he says. Well, that's still interesting. That tells us even more about Apollo. This question of business. But importantly, one last thing, and then we'll put the screen up. We'll just talk. He doesn't know who Rocky is. I don't think it matters. In the night when Rocky goes to the ring, to the arena, right? That guy tells him when he says his shorts are wrong on the poster. Like, that doesn't really matter, does it? The subtext being, Rocky doesn't really matter. He's just a guy to these people, right? They need somebody because they need a fight. And they want to be a certain kind of guy. Snow White contender, okay. But after you check those boxes, it doesn't matter. Apollo's going to show up. He's going to take your lunch. And we're going to make a lot of money. Now, the gaps you would have to fill in would be, what does any of that have to say about us? That I think, that's telling us something about like how we think of ourselves as a society, right? That would work. Because I think it would, actually. All right. I'm going to put this up. We're going to talk about what we have. All I wanted to do with the first day of class is highlight for you what this discussion assignment can do. You can go back. You can take inventory of what you have, right? Some discussion posts were longer than others. This particular student, it was a longer discussion post. That's fine. There's more to look for, okay? But however much you have, okay? Once you take inventory, you got to kind of step back and think, all right, I got two questions to think about. Number one, where do I have the most ammunition, okay? And number two, what do I want to write about? Those aren't always the same thing, by the way. But for instance, to me, it seems like it's one of these, right? We keep coming back to Apollo, like all through, like, again, it's a little easier to see when you put it up like this, or maybe in your notes. In the discussion post, he's everywhere. He's all over the place. Questions of race are too, not quite as much as Apollo himself. But to me, it seems like for this student, and I'm not in their head, so I can't answer this question, it's probably one of these. They keep writing about it. The next question is, for this assignment, this is where we start moving into how do you make this into a paper. This is a scene analysis, okay? That means, with some exceptions, and I would want you to talk to me first, okay? I want you focused on a scene, just like we've done in class. Can you guys think of a scene we might look at if we wanted to talk about Apollo? Maybe as a persona, maybe the pressure he feels, maybe business concerns. We may not be able to do all that, But for this assignment, we got to focus on a scene. You guys think of one?
Yeah, you guys can go back to when the manager was watching Rocky fight and,
The trainer.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. The one we watched last week.
Yeah, because it's like the whole thing, he's meeting with the promoter, he's sitting down with the journalist, and then whoever's a well-dressed guy with him, he's sitting with him as well.
Yeah. He's separate,
Yeah.
right? In a weird way. All right, I'm getting ahead of it. But yeah. Okay. Say we took that scene on. The trainer is worried. Is how I'm going to kind of sum up that scene. All right. This is how your paper will work structurally. I think it's 2 to 3 pages. 2 pages, is that right? I assume you guys would know. But okay. 2 pages is not a lot of space. I'm going to talk to you about an introduction real quick, because that's all it can be in this assignment. Most of what you're going to do is body paragraphs, right? And we've been practicing that. We'll talk about it again. To begin with, you just have to set the scene. Tell me what we're looking at. This is summary, mostly. Okay? How would we think back to that scene now? Okay? How would we, in 3-4 sentences, something like that, how would we sum up that scene? What are some moments we need to make sure we mention?
Body language. Like when he sits up and he's scared.
Okay. And again, this is just summary. You don't have to get super analytical yet, but I can tell that's where your head is. Trainer, takes notice of what? Of Rocky's enthusiasm, we'll say. Okay. What else? That's one of our sentences. We probably got 3 or 4 more tops. Just import like the highlights of this scene, because that's all you're giving me in your intro. Just telling me what we're looking at. What else happens? Rocky? Yeah. All right. And we'll be a little more to it. Rocky fights meat. Yeah. That's 2 of our sentences. We got 2 or 3 more. There's one big sort of element that we have to mention. One important character. Huh?
Apollo doesn't care.
Yeah. Apollo.
Much mind.
What's that?
Doesn't pay it much mind.
Yeah, like he brushes off his trainer's concerns, right? Okay. One other maybe important, it is important, maybe not quite as important as those players. Why does Apollo brush his trainer off? What is he doing instead? Business. You'd have to be a little more specific than that. But yes. Okay. Real quick, I'm taking notes. I just want to make that clear. I would prefer you write me sentences. Okay. But what's that? So you would be surprised. But you write those out, that's a pretty decent little summary of that scene, right? This is plot. You are not performing analysis yet. I just need to know, what are you going to talk to me about? Okay? After this, you have one thing that's necessary and one thing that's possible. The other necessary thing is context. Now, this will vary depending on what you do, but this is the one place in the paper, maybe this is the primary location in your paper where you can briefly reference other scenes. Okay? Now, what do I mean by this? The best example I can think of, all the way back to, I think it was the very first day, I pointed out to you guys that when Rocky goes to see Adrian in the pet shop, and we keep seeing her behind the bars almost like she's in a cage, right? that scene on its own doesn't offer a whole lot in terms of what she might be trapped by, you know? You kind of need other parts of the movie to better contextualize that. You see what I'm saying? So in your paper, you would still summarize that scene, but then in, you could probably do it in 2 sentences. After that, if you're going to talk about that element, okay, what's some important context we need if we're thinking about what is Adrian trapped by? What other parts of the movie might we briefly reference? Yeah. Paulie. Something to do with Paulie. The piece of shit that he is. Yeah. Yeah. That'd be good enough for me. Now to bring it back to this, we don't know yet what we're going to talk about. I mean, we have some ideas. But just so we have some options, can you guys think of any maybe important context? Another moment or two in the movie, somehow dealing with Apollo that we might want to make sure our reader knows about. So we're thinking about, seems like we're definitely thinking about business. We might be thinking about his character, we don't know yet. We might be thinking about pressure, we don't know yet. We're not in the scene with the poster, but we could offer it. What's some important context do you think we could put here for Apollo? Yeah.
You could maybe mention the first time Rocky sees Apollo in the bar.
On TV.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. That's interesting. So, I have more to say, but okay. Apollo's intro, not just how Rocky meets him, but how we meet him as well, right? Okay. Good. That's interesting. One other thing. I just want to have some options here. One other just like important thing from the movie involving Apollo that's not in this scene.
Actual fight.
Okay. What do you, like what part? Because it's kind of long. Like what part do you think?
Probably like right at the end when he hits his claws and like you said, the line when he's like he's not gonna be able to match.
Okay. I like how he says it. Ain't he?
Also, when the trainer told him to stop playing with him,
I didn't hear anything you just said, man. What's up?
when the trainer told him to stop fooling around with him and knock him out in 2, something like that.
Oh, yeah. We'll leave it at that. Okay. So, this part is hard without knowing what we're going to have, but I'm just doing this to illustrate it for you. You got to give me the scene. Don't take a long time. I mean it. 4 sentences, 5 sentences, actually, absolutely max. You don't need more than that, okay? Highlights. Context, that depends on what you're going to look at. So we might end up going with this if we write this paper. Might be something totally different. It really depends on what the student focuses on, okay? Lastly, and this is weird to say, but it's optional. Thesis. For this paper, I say it's optional. I wish there was a better word. I just don't have it. I would like you all to attempt one, okay? But what I would like you to know is that you're writing a paper on one scene. It's going to be damn hard to come up with a thesis, right? So the way I would like you to think about it, I would like you to attempt one, and it can take this context into account, okay? What that kind of means you're sort of doing, and we'll talk about this more next time. You're investigating this scene, but you also have this stuff in mind, okay? This stuff is going to make something in this scene a little more important, a little more significant. You follow? That, I think, will allow you to give this a shot. You would not be able to come up with a thesis on your own for one scene. That's a tall order. But with some of this in your bag, I think you can. We'll talk about it next time. This is how I would write the introduction. Okay? Well, I guess I would be remiss not to point this out. You do want to, at the very top, introduce the text. In Sylvester Stallone's Rocky from 1976, he blah, blah, blah. I, however, am going to focus on, get to the scene. But yeah, you do want to say that we're talking about Rocky. Questions about that? Cool. The next thing, again, this would be difficult because we're not in the student's head. We got to pick a specific thing from this scene. We're not going to do this today. We don't have time. I want you guys to have time to write. But I just want to throw a couple out there. It's the scene where Rocky's fighting the meat. Trainer sees it on TV. Trainer's like, "Hey, champ, you should see this." And he's like, "Nah, I'm in business too," right? Like that's basically my reenactment of the scene. What's like 2 or 3 things, if you were this student, you might focus on from that scene? Specific elements. What's that?
That quote.
Which one? The business? Yeah. That's a good one. Hard not to talk about that. The sort of double entendre nature of it. Apollo means business, like he's gonna get it, but he means business, like he's dressed very nice and he's worried about that stuff. Absolutely. Okay. What else? You have to talk about the trainer, right? What about him though?
How he's presented in this scene.
How is he presented?
Open shirt, heel.
He looks very different from everyone else in the room, even Apollo, right? Now you see Apollo later. Carl Weathers, by the way, very good shape. Good for him. But not in this scene. He's in a suit. He looks like one of those people. That's important too. I think you could successfully argue that the trainer's shirt is purposefully left open. Not only do you get to see that he's in good shape, he's much more casual. Maybe he doesn't quite fit in for some reason that you would have to think about. Right? He's not a part of this world. He's there for Apollo, but he's more a part of the fighting world, right? He's still attuned to that. I think you could argue. But again, the question would be why? But it starts with that shirt. These are body paragraphs, okay? You got to focus on specific elements, like the ones we mentioned, to build body paragraphs in the way that we've talked about, okay? This is a 2-page paper. I mean, with an intro, and maybe we'll talk about conclusions next time. Conclusions do not matter. But, 2 body paragraphs might be it, you know what I'm saying? Like, really. 3 tops. Like, I just don't. You're not going to have that much room, you know what I'm saying? So, the last thing I'll leave you with, because I really want to shut up and let you work a little bit. I would do 2 things. Number 1, be as specific as you can, both in terms of your evidence and what you have to say about that evidence. And we're going to talk about that a little bit next time. But also, just acknowledge to yourself that whatever you pick to begin with isn't necessarily what you're going to end up with. Sometimes you write a paragraph and it's shit. That happens. Get it to the side, write another one. You know, this is 2 pages. So like every paragraph is kind of going to matter a lot. That's my advice. Any questions about any of that?